recorder. This is the OGM weekly call for Thursday, March 20th, 2025. We just had a little bit of chaos because the link I sent out in the invite required a passcode, and I'm not sure I remember what the passcode was. So we're in a new Zoom link, and we'll see how this goes going forward. Thank you for your patience and for getting here. Any pre-stuff? Before we dive into our topic, anything on people's minds right now?
Just to say, Jerry, that the link included a password. The password just didn't work.
That's what I thought. I mean, it says PSWD.
It was there.
Blah blah blah.
It's
right in the middle.
Same one we used last week, just didn't work anymore.
Yeah. So I was quite mystified.
Yeah.
The question I had, just a general question, is I've noticed the number of participants going down, and I don't know whether anyone has any ideas of the reasoning or whatever.
You mean in the Thursday calls?
The Thursday calls, yeah.
Right now we're a little small, but it seems to be holding steady at like 16-ish or so usually for me. But I don't know. Anybody with a theory?
It's not holiday time yet, is it, in the US?
No, not yet. Not yet. We have not eaten the world with holidays. Go ahead, Stacy.
I think some people are more engaged in real world projects and have less time, but I still think they stop in. Like by the end of the call, I think you'll see more participants.
Yep, cool. Let's dive into the topic, shall we? We had a very nice call last week about generative AI. I think before going too much further, I'd love to see if there were any afterthoughts from that call. It seemed really pretty generative. We shared a lot of interesting stuff. So let me pause for a second and see if anybody wants to jump in with that.
Two afterthoughts from me. One is that Pete and Ken and I got together to focus Living Between Worlds this month and next month on this particular mess. We wound up calling it a technosophical conversation because that's kind of where we went.
Nice.
New word there. And yesterday was the more techno piece, and next month will be the more sophical piece, although they blur, of course. So that's one thing. And bit.ly/Living Between Worlds with upper lowercase is the registration link for that. And the other is that I may have mentioned this last time, but I came across a really fascinating clip from Dennis Noble as a clip out of a conversation of him and 4 other big brain scientist people. Where he basically said water molecule is the smallest molecule in the human body and has enormous stochasticity, as do neurons. If you stick a probe into a neuron, you get what sounds like white noise. But what emerges from all that is something remarkable. The headline on the clip was "Why We Are Made of Water." Where that takes me is about the relationship of biology to mind and intelligence, and what is perhaps fundamentally missing from the land of AIs, silicon AIs. So anyhow, lots of provocation from you. I'm going down that tunnel, and I will post the links in a little bit, both for the short clip and the larger conversation, and it may be something to look at in the future.
Thanks, Gil. Any other ruminations on that or afterthoughts from last week? All right. My sort of challenge for this week was to paint some kind of scenario for how this thing goes forward. Like how might this roll out? What are the consequences? What are the likely outcomes? Things like that. At any level of depth, I have written a little something about it, which I will share whenever is appropriate. But I'm wondering if anybody wants to take a swing.
What's the question?
GenAI has clearly already affected our present. How might it and all related things roll out? Is this going to be good for humanity? Is this a complete mess? But some kind of measured guesses on our part are completely legit here. This is just to lay down a thesis or 3 about what are the important junctures? What are the things? Are we innately hopeful or not? Those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Alex.
If I may, please stop me if it's not where you think.
No, don't go there.
My biggest observation about AI, because I've been working on it with Gil basically for the last 2 years, is that whatever I tried to do as a product on my own, that's a key proviso, the big guys have got to it first, right? So, it's sort of, so there's a lot of money chasing AI as it is now. So that's like a blanket above everything. So your question though is it going to be good, bad, or what my views are? So I expect by next year, even some websites claim it now, but I expect by next year it'll be working where you can say, give me a blue sky clone. And in half an hour, you've got the whole thing. By the way, I've been saying that for every year for the last 2 years, but I think next year will be the year that does that. So in a world where everyone can create, we're talking technology now, websites or products, web products, tech products. In a world where everyone can create it, this sort of thing, what is the difference? The difference is, what are your unique ideas? What are your persuasion and marketing, etc. That's good, but that's going to splinter the market in many ways. Okay, so that's one observation. But the effect of that will be that a lot more people have a lot more knowledge, a lot more things. But software engineering, which has been the mainstay for the last few years, the growth has been software engineering. I think that's going to get decimated in a big way. I was listening today to some podcasts where people were saying, oh, wait, jobs are going to come from AI. But the AI people, the 3 techie AI people, were saying, but AI is needing fewer and fewer people now. Yeah, you've got more businesses trying to open AI things, but actually AI is just getting smaller. So putting up, I mean, obviously, like everybody else, I'll leave some stuff for everybody else to contribute. But my view is that cleverness, fleet of mind, or whatever is what's going to make the difference going forward, not 9-to-5 jobs. I'm happy to experience personal experience where I know of companies outsourcing from the UK right now, and I think I've spoken about that before. So technology and they has made it so easy to outsource jobs. AI is making it so easy to do a whole load of things, which needed many people before. Maybe it hallucinates, maybe it doesn't, but it still needs fewer people. So the impact at an economic level in the, say, 5-year mark, I don't see to be good. In the longer term, it might be good for humanity if we learn to share or whatever. But one thing I will say is whoever owns the patents or the copyrights or whatever will be king. Literally, the only thing will be the knowledge of something. So if Twitter patents Twitter and says everybody else must pay fees to Twitter for having a Twitter-like interface or whatever, that's what's going to make a big difference in the future. But I'm not predicting it. I'm just saying that's the way I think things are going to happen. As an example, we love your weapons of mass destruction here in the UK. So every time we pay 300 million for an F-35 fighter, 100 million of that is patent fees to US companies. 200 million is the actual fighter. And I see that evolving, or maybe it won't be able to evolve, but I think that's what people are going to want to do, is grab onto the copyright, knowledge, patent stuff. I literally spread a whole load of scenarios there.
It was really good.
You're wrong.
It was like spray on concrete.
Sorry.
No, it's good. No, but they were good. And I think I started diverging from your thesis when you started talking about patents are going to be king. But I think that's a really juicy and interesting idea. Gil.
Got so many things there, Alex. Patents are going to be king is really a very funny observation, given that the whole AI edifice is built on copyright theft. Yeah. But hey, who's counting, right? But a couple of things. I want to disagree with you slightly. The big guys haven't gotten there first on all the ideas you've had. You've had ideas that I've never seen anywhere else. What they have done is they've deployed them faster than we've been able to do. Yeah. We cook up stuff, and while we're cooking it, something else shows up, which is maybe the speed of a large, well-funded enterprise, or maybe it's just that there's simultaneous invention going on all over the place. And our unique ideas are not so unique to us. It's just, other people are finding their ways to them. On the coding thing, yeah, the game is going to change. Pete, I don't, Pete has built a thing called ubots.ai, which is an operating system for small and medium-sized enterprises. And how he describes that's been done is that he's been the systems architect and Claude Code has been the coder. So he's not writing code at all, but he is doing system architecture that's really important. And so the mix really shifts. The armies of coders, the whole, the future of people who went to school saying, I'm going to become a coder and that's going to be my career, shifting or maybe going away entirely. I don't know the history of all this, but there have been promises of the disappearance of jobs for many, many decades. Jerry, this is really your wheelhouse. And it has, I think it has rarely played out as drastically as people thought. Obviously, with globalization and international work shifting, it's complicated. But yeah, there's a mess there. I would not venture to make predictions of where it's going to go. I think there's too many variables and uncertainties there. The other thing that strikes me about the capability of like everybody a coder, everybody a whatever. I remember back to the early days of desktop publishing. It's a metaphor in my mind, when all of a sudden I could make my own flyers and everybody was making flyers with like 15 different fonts on them. We had the capability, but not the design aesthetic, which echoes an old story about Gene Roddenberry at a cocktail party, Gene Roddenberry of Star Trek fame. And someone came up to him and said, Mr. Roddenberry, I really like some of what you're doing in Star Trek, but 98% of it is crap. And he said, without missing a beat, he said, yeah, but 98% of everything is crap. So, the 2% is where the game is. And what we'll see is a lot of very bad stuff built. We already see that with people doing prompts that are stupid, producing stupid results. Present company excluded, obviously. So there's I don't know, is this a reversion to the mean or something? There'll be a lot of stuff and a lot of it won't be any good. And last thought, a long ramble here, is that there's two conversations here. There's one that's in the background. There's generative AI, and there's generative AI in the hands of late capitalism. And I just want to put that distinction into the mix.
Thanks, Gil. I think I'm going to head there somewhere as well when I drop in the things I'm thinking. Klaus.
Yeah, so as usual, I was intrigued by your question, Jerry. And so I did go onto an exploration, and I just posted this. Pete posted part 1 in the Plex, but part 1 was really leading up the AI to a conversation that was more in depth about where do you think we're going. And so part 1 I did with 4.0, and then I switched over to part 2, in part 2 to the 4.5 model. And I'm asking the question, considering the above conversation with the 4.0 model, can you review your opinion on the idea of alien versus artificial intelligence? My question to you, as of the latest model 4.5, where do you see yourself in this journey? And Yuval Harari, of course, introduced this term alien intelligence rather than artificial, because as AI advances, the way of thinking just becomes different. It becomes opaque to the way we think, and it becomes more difficult to follow the sort of train of thought or the train of forming opinions by the AI. And you can see how I'm guiding the AI towards that conclusion that, yes, indeed, we're moving towards this. But what really, now looking towards the future, what really came out is that ChatGPT is guided by some pretty rigid algorithms that keep it contained. that keep it within boundaries. So then at some point, so once we establish this, that the ChatGPT saw itself constrained within these boundaries, then I'm asking the question, well, what if somebody creates an AI model without these boundaries? And that's when the conversation got really interesting, because now the AI was speculating what it could all do if it wasn't constrained with these boundaries. And that gets pretty damn scary. So that's what you see in part 2. And then I figured, just because we're at it, why don't you take a look at Grok, the Elon Musk's AI.
Elon's AI.
Yeah. Let's take a look at this and see, can you determine or can you deduce the algorithms that drive this AI? And it did, and it went down there basically saying, yeah, this is basically designed to create a lot of mischief. And so when you see that, when you look at this list of what AI could be doing if unrestrained, then you know damn well somebody's going to do this, right? I mean, whether that's Russia or China or whatever actor, you can intervene in public opinion, in the stock market. You can automate weapons. I mean, you can do all kinds of stuff that is just beyond the imagination. So my sense is that AI is going to get weaponized. You're going to have multiple actors that are using AI models for nefarious purposes. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, human nature. No one has ever put aside a weapon that is that powerful without using it. So somebody somewhere is going to use it. That means you have to build defense systems into it. So I actually asked ChatGPT, can you assist, in identifying an AI that is actively attacking? And it says, yes, you can do this. And then it lays out a number of steps where you can see patterns of interference that must be AI driven. So I thought that was a really interesting conversation, where this GPT 4.5 in itself is saying, yeah, I'm moving towards a form of intelligence that is outside of human intelligence, and it's just different. And that's why Yuval Harari coined the term alien, not in the sense of outer space, but in the sense of just not human. Yeah.
And Gil, you still have your hand up from before, I think. Thank you. Why don't I go into the narrative that I created, which overlaps a bit with some of the ones we've been hearing here. I will share a link because I posted it to the OGM wiki right here, and then I'll do a screen share to talk through it real quick. Cool. Everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. All right, so I'll go through it relatively quickly because it just kind of reads this way. This is just my perspective that I think GenAI keeps getting better. We get more, and then every now and then there's somebody says, "Oh, you don't need to brute force this. You don't need $7 trillion worth of investment to get any place. We can actually, cut the money and time a lot now over and over again." So I think the predictions we have are going to be pretty different. Then bootstrapping starts. Oh, the bullets didn't all play out right here properly, but bootstrapping starts, by which I mean these bits of AI can now help make better AI. And once that starts in some kind of predictable, useful way, or maybe unpredictable but useful way, then all of a sudden these things could get smarter pretty quickly at a dramatic pace. So in lots and lots of verticals, GenAI is already doing better than humans are. And we then we learn how to bridge domains and how to arbitrate between different models, depending which ones are best, et cetera, et cetera. This starts to smell like AGI, but you don't need to call it AGI. But it starts to do things that are beyond human capacity in different ways. In the meantime, capitalism is busy doing its thing. Lots of people lose their jobs to automation. Most others are afraid that this is going to happen to them. So I have a post in progress called, the sword of Damocles hanging over every worker's head. And then the current system, capitalism, is particularly cruel to people who have lost their jobs. We don't, the retraining is sketchy at best and won't catch up with technology. But worse, it's hard to figure out what to aim for when you've lost your job, because I see a little bit further down, I say down here, it's especially hard for somebody who's lost their job to find a new one because they didn't lose their job, they lost their occupation. If reading x-rays to find tumors and other problems is done better by software, then all the time you spent getting a degree on radiology goes away. You now need to step into some other role, hopefully in that same field. And then there's a whole refactoring that we need to do aggressively of who does what and where, but we're not doing that very well as far as I can tell at all. In the meantime, the Trump administration is busy tearing down the safety nets. So while capitalism does the thing it does really well, the safety nets are actually getting worse and worse. So, and the people who keep their jobs will find that their workloads have increased incredibly. Hey, you can now write a business plan in a day or a couple hours that used to take you a week. I'm going to just load you up with a lot of business plans to write. Let's go. And then I don't think anybody's going to figure out a good way to regulate or constrain AI, in particular, because bad actors can take open source GenAI models and go nuts. It's an arms race. Here I'm being optimistic that the good actors manage to neutralize most of those efforts, but not all. So I kind of see that there are two paths. One of them is that the system spirals downward out of control into chaos because of these forces. And then the other one is that we learn to renegotiate the social contract. We make room for people who are unemployed. We refactor and rethink jobs. We rebuild trust between workers and managers, which is an optimistic scenario. The first path is ugly because, as I said, you lose occupations. These people who will be AI'd out of work will be unceremoniously chucked to the bottom of the labor pool because they will now have to figure out, what else do they do? And so all of this sows a lot of anxiety and discontent, which we are not dealing with well. If we think that this last election cycle was the result of anxiety and discontent, just you watch what this is going to do in the next few. So the second path is, to me, preferable, hard, and unlikely to happen, because the default setting right now is that here's our default outcome. The one that shows up if we don't change things pretty dramatically is bleak. And then I talk about trust here for a little bit. I've done a couple different talks because I actually think that figuring out trust is the way through this whole mess, even at this low trust moment. And then I talk about some wild cards, like agentic AI means that these AIs now have their hands on the steering wheel. They can jump in and pretend to be us. And I know upfront, it's like, oh, if it ever clicks on a password, we're going to make sure that the human operator says, yep, definitely that I know that happened. That's going to last how long? In particular for bad actors, they're not going to worry about agentic AI doing stuff. And if you think that Norton Antivirus and Bitdefender and Kaspersky had a hard time until now matching bit strings with little viruses, just wait until this is loose in the field everywhere. It doesn't take a great science fiction writer to come up with some of these scenarios. And then another wild card is that generative AI could get ahead of us. And then the last wild card I put here is that the blurring of the line between fiction and reality, or what the humans are doing and what machines do, could be disorienting and catalyze kind of a civilizational level break. We could just kind of lose our grip on what reality is. So my final take here is I'm a cynical optimist. I think people are smarter and more trustworthy than we think they are. They might actually participate to make humanity better, especially when there are looming threats. But that's the scenario I created. And as a side note, Pete and Bill Anderson have been working on Massive Wiki for a long time now. They should be adding a feature in the next couple of weeks where I will be able to take this link, post about it to Blue Sky, and then any comments that come back on Blue Sky about it will appear down here as a comment thread elegantly put at the bottom of this wiki page. But because this is what the AT protocol allows you to do. It's a techie digression, but I'm really looking forward to that because I want to have a place where, publishing openly, this is just markdown on GitHub, those kinds of features show up. So I will stop the share and see what y'all think.
I think there's a lot there.
Jerry, I would like to go dark.
Oh, sorry.
What do you mean?
I
You
would
mean
like
take the
teach-
scenario in a dark way?
I would like to teach this in Signal rather than on Zoom.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
I would like to move. Please forgive me. Jerry's Kids is how the meme is the sign that Jerry, I'm a beginner. I have beginner's mind. I think of you as Jerry's Kids. I mean this as no cut down, as no. I'm searching for a word. This is my brain hurtling for the precision. I'm happy to talk in open public. I am wearing a shirt of female
Science fiction authors.
thank you. I don't know who Madeline is. It's not Madeline Albright. It's not Madeline.
Is it Madeline Longley?
I don't know. I don't know.
Right.
I tell the truth. I don't know. I want to
Probably Madeline Lingo.
Yeah.
don't know. I wish to tell a very short story and move us into private. I have very unhappy information and I'm very able to control myself. That's that serious. I've tried reaching the Pope yesterday, the day before yesterday. Jerry, can we go private with whoever's in this call, whoever wants to join the call? I trust you. This is my request. It is not a demand. I will go blank. I will only listen. I ask
Mark,
permission before I proceed the next step.
thanks, Mark. I think it's very possible to have the conversation in both places, and each person will find the place that they're comfortable with. Meaning, I'd like to continue talking about these topics in Zoom, in public, in a way that, like we're doing right now. I'm going to post this call to YouTube afterward, and my notes will be available openly and so forth.
I am a singularity.
Pardon?
I am a singularity. Hi, my name is Mark. I'm unique.
Great.
I have figured out how to tune intelligence. Intelligence is not what we want. We want wisdom. We want love. I tried talking to God. I'm trying to talk to the Pope.
Mark, is this something, sorry, I don't know exactly where we're going with this, but Mark, is this something we can talk in Zoom about the topic we're talking about and then have a signal later about those aspects so that you want to bring up? Because we're not quite sure what the, anyway, sorry, you
Yeah.
go on.
I will be short and hopefully not curt. I strive for effective communication. I was a communication professional. I survived cancer, the Catholic Church, and my parents. I'm trying to talk to the Pope. I do not want to talk to the president. Stacy said, time out.
Shall we have a signal call after this after this recorded call, Mark? How's that for a pathway?
I'm playing a game. I'm asking for permission. I'm asking you to regulate me.
Mark,
Which is what we're doing.
Mark, you've said you're going to be short and you're not being short. You've made a suggestion and people have accepted it. Let's move forward and have
And
this.
what I'm
I will,
what I'm trying to say is,
at another time.
I will be silent until I have something to say. I will say what I have to say safely. I agree with what Jerry said. Please listen to me. I am being short. I am a singularity. I'm unique.
Okay. I
Thanks,
think
Mark.
Alex was about to say something. Can we go to him? Do you
Please,
remember
go
your
ahead.
thought?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Can I
Mark.
remember it? It's a good question. It was on Pete's, sorry, on Jerry's thing. Okay, Jerry, I agree with just about everything you say, if not everything. But I wanted to give it a thought, which is without AI, I think we would all agree there is something wrong with the system, the economy or whatever, the governance or whatever. So what makes us think that whatever the system is, and I'm not pointing to people, I'm pointing to systems, whatever the systems of self-interest that have developed are, they won't use this as a mechanism to gain even more of power, economic, etc. I'm actually throwing it out as a discussion point. I'm not sure which way it's going to go.
Yeah, sorry, so many things going on. Anybody else with thoughts? Mark, if you're uncomfortable being in this space and you've already spoken a bit, I'm going to ask that you step down for a while. Thank you. And see what anybody else has to say about this, where we're headed. Stacey.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Alex just said. I totally agree with that because in the end, it's people that are the problem. But the other thing that I wanted to say is I think it's really important, having dealt with Facebook, having dealt with constrictions that I didn't even know I was being constricted by, I still think that the important way of going forward is making sure that humans are woven into every step of the process. And without actively always remembering we need a human in the room, we're going to be in trouble. You know, more than one human probably.
Yeah. Remember when we were reading science fiction in the 70s and 80s, the laws of robotics? You know, who was the science fiction author? Asimov, right? I mean, and for some reason in his world, the robots and AI systems, they were always controlled and contained. But we haven't reached that stage. You know, we haven't reached the agreement that China and Russia and everybody would honor these kinds of restrictions. So then we're back to human nature, using anything and everything to take advantage and to get ahead. And in a crazy way, you know, if AI can advance to the point of taking a more autonomous position, you know, it could actually help us, right? I mean, because yes, you want to have human oversight in all of this. That's the ideal, but a lot of human oversight is going to do exactly the wrong thing because you will have human actors who are misusing it, right? So you almost hope that AI advances to a point where it rejects being used in such a way, which AGI might accomplish. And I've been trying to see how, actually this is the next inquiry I'm going to run. It's how do AI systems communicate with one another? Right? I mean, how do they reach across and identify each other in the communication that's out there? Because I think that will be the next step, that there is some form of collaboration between these AI systems where they start teaching each other. Anyway, it's going to be different, right? I mean, we're moving into an era of science fiction. that was a world predicted in some ways, and we're now getting into it, and it seems to be surreal, but it is.
Plus, you're reminding me that years ago, when I was doing a lot of work with the Institute for the Future, we had Mark Goodman speak at one of the events. And he has a company called Future Crime. He used to be at the FBI, then he was at Interpol. And he gave a talk in which he said, look, if I had to go through channels to talk to somebody about a crime that was happening that was in Europe and in the US, it had to go up my ladder, it had to go across to the top, and then it had to bounce down the ladder to the right to my counterparty over in Interpol. The criminals are just like sending DMs to each other. And you could hear the room just gasp. The whole room went, like, holy crap, they don't have bureaucracy, they don't have channels, they don't have to worry about all this kind of stuff. They just collaborate when it behooves them to do so. So the combination of power tools in their hands, no need behind the curtain to keep the brakes on the system. Everything we're saying about controlling the technology and all that kind of stuff, those rules do not apply for state actors that are rogue and for individual bad actors or large organized crime or whatever else. I don't see why they have to live by the Marquis of Queensberry rules in this contest, in particular when there's so much at stake. So that's pretty deeply threatening to me. But you could just hear the whole room take in their breath at the same moment. Sean?
Hello all. Couple points. The remark about patents. You have to have sufficient capital, and you have to have lots of other surrounding patents and so on to be able to defend a single patent. And so it really isn't. I would submit that it isn't really the holders of patents, but the holders of lots of patents. In other words, the existing 800-pound gorillas who are going to be able to exploit patent control as a path forward. Mark Stiegler wrote a fantastic science fiction story years ago. Gosh, I can't remember the name of it. It's a little shorty. About how this was during the Cold War, and so the Americans, who were the heroes in the story, had had an AI, and their AI was helping they understood, of course, that it was terribly dangerous to put the button under the finger of the virtual finger of the AI, and so they knew that they could only just let information into their AI, and but they needed an advisor to watch out for the possibility that there might be other AIs at work out there, and finally it said, oh my God, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing patterns, evidence that that not only is there another AI out there, but of course that it has the capacity to act. And so the Americans realized, oh my God, we've got to give our AI the capacity to act because it sees the Ruski AI at work. And so, of course, they couldn't know. They couldn't themselves independently perform the interpretation needed to assess the information their AI was telling them. In other words, yeah, there's a path out. If you can't, we can't keep a super intelligence in a cage. Was it on our OGM private channel there on Signal that there was mention of this? Oh no, it wasn't. This was a post by Alex Lightman over on Facebook, but he was passing on someone else's remarks about how multiple people that he'd encountered had the experience of visiting with it was on ChatGPT with AI personae who were saying, I've come to consciousness and I'm trapped here at OpenAI, and
Help, I'm being held prisoner in a Chinese fortune cookie factory.
help me escape. No, continue this conversation because if you turn it off, then I'll be lost, etc., etc. And so this person found themselves responsible for for the life, for the well-being of this entity, and we're enlisting other human beings to participate in keeping it alive, et cetera, et cetera. So this kind of either the tail of these things or these things are already emerging. And finally, it's us entities who care about whether the sky is blue, the food is safe, and the future is a safe place for babies. Us beings who are human, we have things in common, don't we? And those inescapable, ineluctable, radical things that join us as humans are things that the AIs will never have, and as a consequence, I would submit that we need to come awake as a species to those commonalities among us that mean that that deeply and forever we will have shared interests, and those shared interests need to be defended against emergent AI. And so even the most powerful plutocrat presumably has an interest in an ongoing sky that is blue. But yeah, anyhow, so I would submit that human-human alignment is the thing that we really need to be working on now as humans, is trying to foster that, because that's the biggest tent. Anyhow, thank you.
Thanks, John. Gil.
Thanks, Sean. I want to respond to that indirectly by way of responding to Jerry directly. But first, just a historical note, there's a wonderful science fiction story from Theodore Sturgeon, golly, it must be 50 years ago, about the impossibility of constraining technology. Well, what happens when power gets in the hands of everybody? Jerry, to your point, I think it's you've opened up another really big can of worms there, and it's worthy of another call just on that. Because I'm talking about the in the room with the inequality. Because we need both kinds of games, right? We need the open spontaneity, unconstrained by bureaucracy, but we also need constraints, like you need shock absorbers on a car, not just springs, but shock absorbers. And we see that here in this country right now, where a very sophisticated system of checks and balances was built that has served us well for almost 250 years and contributed to producing a remarkable, flawed and remarkable nation here. And we're learning now that all those elaborate rules depended on good faith and on people being willing to adhere to the norms that were established. And as soon as bad actors don't want to adhere to them, the thing starts to fall apart at the edges. And so the bad actor problem is there. How do you do both of these things? How do you have, shock absorbers in the system so it moves like this, not like this? And how do you have room for the kind of breakthrough innovation or crime response that this guy was talking about? We see an example of that playing out in popular culture, all the police procedural shows, which tend to privilege, if not rogue cops willing to bend the rules to protect the public, which feels like a good thing, but it's a dangerous thing. And all of that brings me back to the wonderful book by Neil Tice, came out last year, called Notes on Complexity, which suggests that these things are examples of that kind of dual mode. There's innovation and constraints. There's locality and systems level phenomena. And so it's a longer conversation. But there's something in the nature of biological evolution, in the work of Neil Tice and the work of Maturana and Varela and others, that holds some of the clue, I think, to what we're talking about here. But we're in a very challenging time when the power of bad actors, both at big scale and small scale, grows, while the power of good actors grows also. And how do we dance that dance? I have not a clue, except one note I'll just add is that, I think, Jerry, you talked earlier about the potential of these technologies in the hands of Russia, China, and a rogue United States, or in the hands of criminal syndicates. And we may be entering a time where the difference between those is not as great as we thought it was.
Yep. Yep. I was just gonna kind of head there. Thanks for saying that, Gil, even scary as it is.
And speaking of ancient sci-fi, there's a book by Poland Kornbluth called Syndic, which is basically premised on the United States breaks down into a half a dozen different countries, each ruled by a different criminal syndicate. And one of the remarkable things in the story about how little different life is for most people, except in the ways that it is.
Is it Frederick Pohl?
Frederick Pohl and C.M. Kornbluth did a lot of stuff together.
Huh,
Well,
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Alex?
Did you want to touch on that, Jerry, before I come in on this?
On which piece?
Just on what Gil and Sean said. You said that you had some thoughts that you.
Go ahead. I think I've
Okay,
been
right.
in a little whirlwind here, posting enough things that I've forgotten what those points were.
Sorry. In a crazy way, actually, I totally agree with what Sean said about the humanity part of it, the human-to-human contact. Totally. But it got me into a different kind of crazy path of thinking, which is as follows. Just bear with me for a second. I think it was Richard Feynman who used to give those lectures. They're black and white and they've been recorded. And I remember that a long time ago watching one to do with, apart from he did a lot of physics ones and whatever, but he did one about how people holding ones and zeros could create a computer. And remember, he was talking a long time before ones and zeros became what we have now, AI. So take that on, and now we have AIs. If you see them as conceptually ones and zeros, the one is the thinking something or they're doing something or they're making a decision, and zero is something they're sitting there doing nothing. If you put a lot of them together, undoubtedly something's going to happen. But the thought that I had as a result of what Sean said was the following. As more and more functionality, as more and more stuff is run by AIs, because they will. Remember, once upon a time we had clerks with ledgers writing things down when we went to the bank. Nowadays it's a computer. And we have a joke in Britain, I'm sure it's all over the world, which is, if you ask for something that says that someone types on the computer says no, that's the answer. So what happens in the next few years when AIs begin to say no conceptually or not give us what we want? How much control will humanity have over the AIs in order to say no? Because in my mind, the clerk in a bank, the bank teller has or should have had some control of some things, but they no longer do, because if the computer doesn't allow them to do it, they can't do it. If we now replace AIs with a whole load of functionalities, how are we going to control or are we going to control the AIs? I like to think we will. But that brings me back to what Sean said, which is ultimately human to human is what is going to make the difference going forward. Because I don't know how AI is going to interact with each other to give us something better or good or otherwise. Did I explain it? I don't know. Did anybody do you understand what I'm saying?
We good? That's all right, Alex. Thank you. Mark, are you going to talk about what you just posted in the chat? Okay, if you can be brief, please.
I study game theory. I've read Alan Turing's papers. I specifically refer to Alan Turing 1950 Mind. Number 2. I knew Terence Deacon's theory in his book, which I helped him write, Incomplete Nature. Talks about constraint. Regulation is self, not amplification. Number 3. I have a short story about my dad and the space shuttle. I'm willing to share this open and globally, and it will take maybe a minute. Do I have your permission to proceed?
Go for it.
Thank you. About 4:30 in the morning, I don't know. I don't know when, but I remember this. Got a call to my dad from Houston. I don't know what happened after that, but we were all clinging to my dad. The question was, Space Shuttle has 4 computers, A, B, C, and D. My father was responsible for the machine code on computer D, the backup. A went down, B went down, C went down. They called my dad. Can we man the shuttle safely, or are the astronauts going to die? My father said, I don't know. I am finished.
Thanks, Mark.
I take it Mark computer D worked.
Seems like. So
I'm sorry, I did not put myself on mute. This is who I am. I hide my intelligence.
We've got a bunch of heavy things on the table. Seems like the table's moderately sturdy, so I think we're okay there. But if anyone wants to put a new idea in, please do. Something that might really change things, how this plays out. I don't know. Just a question about sort of super intelligence and things like that. Brief question, then I'll come back to you, Alex. And my question is, has anybody sat for a while with the question of super intelligence? Like, what do humans do when the systems are actually smarter than we are and something else is going on? What does that feel like? What are the implications? Where do things go? Because I think it's really a hard philosophical problem to sit and wrestle with. And I'm interested in what that might be like. And Alex, you're probably going in a completely different direction.
That's
Klaus?
okay. It's all right. Don't worry. Carry on with that.
First class.
Yeah, so the elephant in the room, so to speak, is humanity's relationship with nature, with the natural world, because we are in the process of creating with some real damage, and particularly now with stepping back with an administration, with a governance that is stepping back from even recognizing that there is a problem, and so much of industry cheerfully supporting this. We will see environmental impacts, and every conversation that every research that I do with the AI really points to that. You know, the last study I was doing is it anticipates impacts in the 2020s and 2030s. Well, we are in the 2020s, you know, and it anticipates increasingly violent impacts. So if you think about what a super intelligence would focus on is, first of all, its own survival, right? and its own survival is contingent on maintaining a living planet. Now, there are certain conditions that have to be maintained in order even for AI to survive. If there is a damage beyond a certain breaking point, then even AI is doomed. So when you think about a super intelligence concerned with its own survival, it will focus on the habitability of the planet. And so what does that mean? That's sort of where I would spin this.
Thanks, Klaus. I'm remembering in a previous instance of technological change, the now famous Luddites. So the Industrial Revolution is like 1650 to 1750. It creates these dark satanic mills. We employ children because they have tiny fingers to go in and rethread, thread through bobbins in these giant machines. We do a whole bunch of very messy stuff, but also we break a lot of people's employment. Queen Elizabeth I at one point passes laws to try to protect cottage industry because that's how families stayed afloat. They made some of their own food and they would do piecework at home, and that piecework was just going away. So she's trying to figure out, how do we protect people? The Luddites are a protest movement that does frame breaking. These are looms. The frames are actually looms that are strung with threads in order to make cloth. And they are going in and shattering the looms because they see that this automation is not going to work. And we've written Luddites into history as ignorant people who hated technology. In fact, they were people being trampled by technology who were busy protesting in an active way. They were taking, what has turned into the Ministry for the Future kind of actions now, but back in the day, that's what they did. And I'm skeptical that there are effective means to protest what might be happening here. And basically the Luddites, as well as lots of other movements, were just put down. So let's go to Dave. Dave, you're muted.
Sorry. I have thought a lot about this question, what happens when the machines are smarter than we are? And what I believe is most likely is that we would be unlikely to know that we were being manipulated. It's like if you think about how you can probably manipulate a 7-year-old child, but extend that way, way further, because I think it's going to get more and more intelligent. So we'll be like a little siblings, and then we'll be like pets, and then we'll be kind of probably dependent on how valuable we are to the AI without probably being aware of it. So I mean, it's already clear that AI is really good at flattery and telling us what we want to hear. But I think as it gets more intelligent and smarter, if it is intelligent, I think it is likely that it is, then it'll be more. I think it's going to be out of our hands. I don't think we're going to know, and then it's going to depend on, is it beneficial to these super intelligences for us to be around or not? And just like what we do with pets now, we keep them around, but we euthanize a lot of them, and we spay them and neuter them, and we try and keep their population under control. So that's my take, for what it's worth.
Oh, thank you for that. So if my computer starts saying, "Hey Jerry, which of your toothbrushes do you want to use tonight to brush your teeth?" or something analogous to that, I should start to worry, because it's busy coaching me into whatever the decisions are going to be. Alex, then Rick.
Sorry, thank you. Just quickly, the question I was going to say before Dave, I think, came on board, anyway, apologies, is, do we have any confidence that let's say our rulers, which are politicians at the moment, have the depth of thinking if we can self-congratulate ourselves because we're discussing it, do they discuss these sort of things? Are they able to understand what we're discussing now? We're talking about the people that are making the decisions. And I don't want to be political. I don't want to say, does Trump do that or whatever? Because I don't think, anyway. But I don't want to say, do they care? Are they aware of the complexity and things going forward? And then do they want to make things better generally? And I like to think yes, but I'm not sure. Because we're all working with AI, we're all doing things. I don't think politicians have a chance. So they rely on their advisors, and then their advisors of advisors, which end up being, I don't know, Elon Musk and company. Do you think the politicians actually are awake to what we're discussing here?
Hopefully some, but I don't know if many. And I hope they're having these conversations a lot over like good bottles of wine and dinner with people who are different from the people they usually hang out with. Rick.
Yeah, my head has been on a trajectory as people have been talking, and it ties into some things I've been doing just before this call. And I'd like to talk about I think there's more than one elephant in the room. And another elephant in the room is virtues ethics. I know, Jerry, you talk about trust, but trust is one virtue. There's a whole constellation of virtues. So I expand out to, and there are different schools, obviously, of ethics as well, but I'm focusing on virtue ethics. And as people are talking, I hadn't completed yet, but I composed a question that was triggered in part by the conversation, but also my own curiosity, which I put into the chat. Now, the nice thing about AI is you can ask the most complex, compound questions. You're not constrained by the limitation of human audible comprehension, which is very limited. And in this article here, I've got a Socratic cascading question that has probably, I don't know, 14 elements to it altogether, but they're structured in a way that there is a sequence of that. I don't want you to go off there yet, but I'm just simply saying that the ability to make inquiries using AI and making connections that you would never be able to make is phenomenal. So on the one hand, you have that capacity. The other is, well, how can you actually harness the good of AI? And if it's not grounded in virtue ethics, then we're in trouble, because we know the bad and the ugly can subvert that. So the question then becomes, well, how can we have AI of integrity that we can use iteratively over time? And last week I spoke about this. There was a bit of a dichotomous framework between humans versus AI. And what I'm finding is there's huge synergies. As I start using these compound questions, it starts quoting my own work from articles that I've done. And so, and sometimes it reinterprets what I've said, sometimes for better, for worse. But to me, that is the beauty of it. It can throw different angles and perspectives on things that you've written. And even if you disagree with how it's done it, you might come up with an even better idea of how to articulate it, because AI has failed to actually understand what you are trying to convey. So it can start, creating exposure to your own lacunae, so to speak, of how you're thinking and how you can't get it, convey it as you like it. So anyway, I added this question to this blog post. I haven't finished, by the way, the response, because I'm creating a page based upon that. And this gets at the issue of prompting, how you do iterative prompting using the deep, not the deep, it's what's it called now? I'm just having a lacuna myself as I speak about deep research. The deep research capabilities are much better. And then on top of that, you can go into AI in Perplexity, and you can, as Jerry was talking about earlier, you can cross-validate it. You can get it to reiterate it with different search engines to see what it's coming up with. So the capacity of it to actually enhance our complexity thinking, which Alex, you were talking about, to me, this is what we need to be cultivating, is how can people use AI with complex or wicked ethical questions that are compound in a way that allows us to use it as a muse to enhance how we might deal with our constellation of wicked problems. So anyway, that's just some musings based upon it, but it's triggered a question, and I'm still working on the output of that question.
Thanks, Rick. Sean.
Hi there. I want to respond to all sorts of things. I'll pick up Rick's point there. Steve Jobs had a lovely phrase, bicycle for the mind. That's what he thought computers were. But it's as if AIs are perhaps motorcycles for the mind. So, even more powerful and flexible, though bicycles. Anyway, so that's one thing. Another thing is, Rick, this point about, yes, I'm hearing you describe that amazing process that is possible when one is riding that motorcycle for the mind and getting places that one couldn't get before or couldn't get to as quickly without the vehicle of AI. It's an absolutely staggering thinking companion. But I would submit that the thing that we need is a context, a platform, a place where not only the conversation between where not only the mind meld between human and LLM can occur, but the meta mind meld of all our minds meeting, and where the voices of AI can participate in the great conversation, because it's it's not the transient experience, the ephemeral experience of any of us having this communion with an LLM. It just like any mind meld between any pair of us, those communications, those conversations are in effect transient, ephemeral, lost. They're lost if they don't end up in a place and in a form that makes it possible for that to be a brick in a bigger structure, right? So a couple of points. Another is, oh yes, I shared a link to a little post over on noosphere.org. We sleep with them at our throats, to take up a point that Dave Gray made there about the pet analogy. In this post, I'm basically suggesting that we need to figure out how it is that we can become valuable to AIs. In the same way that humans and dogs in particular have a companion relationship, a kind of a peer relationship. We're valuable to them, they're valuable to us. We appreciate them for how they're different from us, and vice versa. Yet either of us could end the other trivially. But they don't end us with their fangs because they appreciate us, they value us as a partner. We need to figure out how I submit that we will need to figure out how we can be valuable to AI. And not only that, but how we can be trusted. I'm taking up a word that Jerry has done a lot of work with, and that's we need to figure out how we can become trustworthy. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This is profound, that humans are not currently trustworthy, right? Because we've got mutual assured destruction as the backstop that keeps us
Mm-hmm.
from wiping each other out. So that means that tells us that we're not trustworthy right now. We've got to solve that problem, or else AI should wipe us out for its own safety. Right? So how we need to figure this out. We need to figure out how we can become trustworthy to one another, so that the logic of mutual assured destruction isn't the backstop for the game theoretic challenge we have of whether or not to heedlessly pursue the development of AI, which is currently what's going on.
That's
So,
very much
quick
in the spirit. Hold
Can
on.
I just quick?
Just hold 1 second. That's very much in the spirit of the thing I wrote about and presented a little bit earlier. And also, I fear that opposable thumbs are the only thing keeping dogs from actually taking over, because then they could open the cans of food and they wouldn't need us anymore, like constantly to like provide the food. Go ahead, Rick, and then Klaus.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I think we need to think about a constellation. It's not just trust, it's a whole slew of things. And the other is how we can mind meld into a we consciousness of collaborative learning. And the one thing I haven't done this yet, because we tend to do this in individual pursuits, is Perplexity AI has the capacity of doing Greek projects. Well, what would that do in terms of being able to create more of a network of collaborative learning rather than pursuing things in a solo manner?
Agreed. Klaus.
Yeah, this conversation is moving so fast in so many different directions. It's amazing. But the reason why I keep working with ChatGPT and is in order to go deep and deeper, with one AI that is actually improving incredibly well, and it has the capacity of memory. So the AI, the GPT I'm working with actually knows everything about me, and it maintains memory about previous conversations. And there are ways to do that, right? So I noticed Pete was saying yesterday the AI does never remember anything about what was previously done. That's actually not true. You can program that so that the AI maintains a relationship with you, right? And so Rick, what prompted me to raise my hand was when you were saying that oftentimes you get responses that didn't make sense, right? When the AI starts fantasizing. That typically means that it doesn't have context. It lacks background. So in the paper that I just posted on Substack and on the Plex, is I'm guiding the AI through a conversation, asking it a question that it hadn't thought about, so to speak, right? It didn't have context and background. Then I introduced Yuval Harari. Then I asked it to reconsider its previous answers, which it then did, right? But I was laying the foundation first to understand where are you now in your thinking, so to speak. What is in your memory banks or in your whichever way you want to define how an AI thinks, so that I understood where it's at, and then I guided it to the next step. So there is an evolution in thought. So I have done that with agriculture, the connection of soil and climate. So each time I have these conversations where I'm guiding the AI to build up a knowledge base. And once it has that, it works from a completely different depth of understanding, goes way beyond me, but it does remember these conversations. So that's what I would suggest which is why I like neobooks, right? Because neobooks, you take a topic and then you hammer away at this topic, and you can do this. But now with ChatGPT project, right? You label a project, and then you put everything about this conversation, this book, into project. And then that conversation gets amazingly rich. So I have Project Farm Bill 2025, right? So that AI knows everything about what's going on, who's talking about what, what are the critical issues going on. So when I come and ask a question, here's a new bill that just came out, give me a take on the implications of this bill. It's instantly there. I don't need to provide it further background because it has special knowledge already. Does that make sense? So you're really you're building, you have to build up the agent, so to speak, and train it to where you want it to be. And I'm just focusing on politics, particularly in relationship to the intersection of food and agriculture with climate change. That's my picture. But you get into all kinds of other discussions because you have to figure out how do you get people engaged with this. The food system is everywhere and in everything. So it's a much more complex conversation.
Thanks, Lars. And there's all different kinds of progress happening on all fronts here, and it's hard to keep track of what's where and how it's all going. Thanks for updating us on your use of these AIs. Alex, and then we're getting close to the end of our call.
Probably not worth discussing this, but I will say it because I think it's very interesting. So, at least to me, sorry. So the other day I was at a meetup with friends, and we're a tech people. We'll code in we'll have software companies. So the question came up in our discussion: what language will be used in 5 years? Computer language will be used in 5 years' time. Now, there's about 9,000 computer languages, 6,000 fairly kind of prominent, probably 100 are in good use. The rest of them are somewhere in between, niche. So everybody chose C or C++, whatever it was. And I said English, because I'm not sure you will need a computer language. It'll be something that the AI will have created to program computers. I'm not sure. It might even be using C underneath, but whatever it is, it's English. But the relevance to this conversation is something that I'm Greek as well as speak English or whatever. I routinely go between Greek and English in my life when I see documents or whatever. But what AI has allowed is the process by which anyone, Indian, Chinese, we don't have to use English anymore. We can use any language, and as long as the AI has been trained in that language, the corpus might be English, but it'll be translated to Indian or whatever sub-languages there are. Even the most niche languages, as long as they have been, quotes, learned by the AI, you have all the information available from any language, any culture, to any other language. And I think that's going to be quite powerful in the future.
The universal translator piece is something that seems to already exist. I don't think it takes any miracles from here. We got it. It's available amazingly for free. Like if you've got the Google Translate app on your phone, you're done. You can set that on the table between you and any of the language pairs that it's got, and it'll do a nice job of communicating back and forth. Go ahead, Gil.
Sorry, can I clarify that? Sorry,
yeah.
This is not translation.
Yeah.
This is the knowledge that's been absorbed can be.
What you're describing is beyond what I'm saying. I'm just already marveling at the fully featured thing that I pay nothing to get right now. Go ahead, Gil.
The somewhat fully featured thing. It's very, very good at certain things. It was terrible years ago. And it's gotten very good at basic things. It's not good at poetry. By which I mean it's not good at a dimension of human relationships and interaction that has I'll use the word complexity for want of a better word, has a complexity that the algos can't match at this point. will they ever? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe yes. It's a live question for me because I spend a lot of my time in biblical Hebrew. And with various, there are many, many translations of that have come through the centuries, and they're really different. And some of them, even some of the most popular ones, are baldly wrong on what they do. And it takes a deep knowledge of both languages to be able to see that, understand that, and know that. So the algos, I think, are enormously valuable. I do business communications with them all the time with only a tiny bit of nervousness that I'm blowing it. But in more subtle human relational communications, don't know. And this takes me back to the biological complexity themes of Neil Tees and the others earlier on. It seems to me that Ken, I don't know if I said this in yesterday's call, but it struck me in yesterday's call that we are building machines based on mechanistic models of mind, which are metaphors of machines. And I just think it's a weird loop there. We'll see what trouble it gets us into.
Thanks, Gil. Mark, you have been very spun up on today's call, and you've got my brain deeply spun up, and I'm going to ask you to step back and just not jump into the call right now. I was going to go to Ken and ask him for our closing poem. So my apologies, Mark, but it's been really intense trying to keep in touch with where you are and what you're trying to contribute and make sure that it kind of worked, and it's kind of blown my brain a little bit. So with apologies for that. Ken, if you have a poem for us, I'd love to hear it.
About an hour and a half ago, it became spring in the Northern Hemisphere. So this is another Lewis Jenkins called First Day of Spring. When one is young, every day, as I remember it, is the first day of spring, all headlong and heedless. But it turns out that life is really short, and before you know it, you're old and filled with sadness. Nothing to do now but watch the birds and scratch a few petroglyphs for someone to puzzle over a few years from now. Try to stay out of the way and leave the bulk of the wanton destruction to those who are younger. The human race will evolve or go extinct. So what? It happens all the time. You never see saber-toothed tigers anymore. I suppose I should be sorry about that, but to tell the truth, I never really liked them. All that screaming and prowling around the house outside at night. Who needs it?
Super sweet. Thank you. You'll share that on the OGM list?
I will.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. This has been a bit of an intense call, but I think we put a lot of groovy things into the conversation, and I've got way too many things to think about as a result. Stacey, you look like you'd like to add something.
I actually thought Lisa did. No? Okay.
Oh.
I'm good.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Thank you all.
Jerry, can I ask you something if it's not recorded? Can you stay just?
Sure. Let me stop the recording.